Hello, everyone, and welcome to the WorkSafe Saskatchewan's presentation on workplace safety. My name is Brad Compton. I am an account manager with the Workers' Compensation Board. A little bit about myself before I begin. As an account manager, I have a couple of main responsibilities. One of them is to work with employers throughout the province, working on things like safety management systems, talking about injury rates and how we reduce those, how we prevent people from getting hurt and that type of thing. And the other half of my job, where I spend the rest of my time doing young worker injury prevention. So doing things like this, where I go out and do presentations, whether it's virtually or, of course, used to be in person and that kind of thing. Work with different stakeholders like schools, school divisions, post-secondary as well. I do work with them quite a bit as well. Teachers, employers, parents, that kind of thing. So for the purpose of this presentation, when we're talking about young workers, we mean people that are under the age of 25. So in Saskatchewan, you are allowed to work as young as 14. So if you're 14 or 15, you can work as long as you have your Young Worker Readiness Certificate course, which you can find on saskatchewan.ca, as well as a parent or guardian's signature. As long as your employer has record or copy of those, you're allowed to work in most industries. That excludes industries like construction, which you have to be 16 years old to work in, as well as a variety of others. But for the most part, you can work in most industries starting at the age of 14. For this presentation, we're going to review, it's not going to take too long. We have a couple of videos to share with you. It's going to be about 20 minutes in duration in total. Some of the things that I'm hoping that you can take from this are some tips on how you can keep yourself safe in the workplace and healthy, as well as we're going to review things like 3 rights and some things that you can do, like I mentioned, to prevent injuries to yourself and to others. I'm going to share a story as well with you. And so that's what the presentation is going to look like here today. Like I said, I'm here representing WorkSafe Saskatchewan. WorkSafe Saskatchewan is a partnership between the Workers' Compensation Board and the Ministry of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety, specifically the Occupational Health and Safety Division we work closely with. They are the folks that do inspections in the workplace. So they go and actually visit the workplace and ensure that the rules and that kind of thing are being followed. On the WCB side, we do more education and injury prevention awareness, such as things like this. So I focus on young workers for a couple of main reasons. One, to improve the safety culture in Saskatchewan. So it wasn't very long ago that we were at very close to the bottom as far as our injury rates. So in other words, we were getting hurt at work considerably more than workers in other provinces were getting hurt at work. So we know that in order to improve the safety culture, obviously speaking with people who are just starting their working adventure, or are thinking about starting it, it's important that they're aware of the risks and that they're able and capable to make those right decisions in the workplace. So over the last little while, we've improved our injury rates compared to other provinces. So we used to be kind of bottom 2. Now we're in the middle of the pack. So we're heading the right direction, but we're wanting to obviously keep that up. So that's one main reason for focusing on young workers. And the second one is that if you're under the age of 25, you're at a higher risk of being hurt at work. So that's why we focus so much on young workers and new workers and that type of thing as well. Why are young people at higher risk than other age groups? Well, we know that very oftentimes they don't get the training and the orientation that they need. And so there's some information out there that says across Canada, about 52% of all new young workers get orientation when they start a job. So that's bad, because obviously that means that the other half, the 48% of people who are new to the job, don't get orientation. Orientation is important because yes, you need to know, when you think about orientation, you think about, here's when your breaks are, here's some of the tasks you're going to be doing. The washrooms are there, take your lunch break at this time. You can park your car over here. Here's the work hours. Here's when you get paid. All that kind of employment standard stuff and that type of thing. But another really critical piece of orientation is informing workers of how they can protect themselves. So they need to know what kind of hazards exist and what kind of things are put in place to protect them from those hazards. And so when you're not getting that information, you get put at higher risk. Also, the other piece of an orientation is that hopefully it's a supervisor or at least a senior employee who's giving it to you. So you can create that relationship with them so that if there's any issues or things like that that come up, you know who you can contact to find out more about that. Second one is experience. So that doesn't necessarily mean that people that are older um, may be at less risk. So when we talk about experience, we're talking about how long have you been at that job for? So that's the other part, is that we know that regardless of your age, when you're new to a job, you're at a considerably higher risk of being injured. So you can be 15, 35, 55, doesn't matter. When you switch from one job and all of a sudden you're working somewhere else, for that first 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, the slope gradually goes down, starting at the highest being, this first month. But we know that when you're new, so newness can put you at risk. The reason for this is um, you have new coworkers, you're working with new materials, tools, chemicals, that kind of thing. Maybe you're not as familiar with the way things operate in that workplace. And so that's a big piece of it. And probably the biggest piece is speaking up, which is the next point. One of the things, I've been doing this job for a number of years now, and one of the things that I find to be a very common theme, so I go out and do presentations or have meetings and different things like that, and so I get to hear a lot of workers' stories about being injured, specifically for younger workers. And one of the things that almost all of them say is, I felt like maybe what I was doing wasn't right, or I wasn't comfortable doing what I was doing, and that kind of thing. I wasn't comfortable to speak up. I was the youngest person in the workplace, or I was the newest person there, so I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was doing. So rather than speaking up, I just went ahead and did it, or I watched someone else do it first and followed suit and that kind of thing. And so one of the biggest things you can take away from the presentation today, and we'll show on the video later as well, is one of the best things you can do is speak up. If you have questions, don't be afraid to ask. That can prevent you from being injured and prevent your own injury network and all kinds of things. So and the last thing is, and this one's out of your hands. What kind of supervisor do you have? There's good supervisors and there's bad supervisors. Good supervisors are the ones who provide orientation and training. They encourage you to speak up and ask questions. They try to make you feel comfortable in that workplace. They encourage you to speak up. Supervisors who are good experience less injuries for all workers who are working under them. A bad supervisor is a supervisor who maybe doesn't provide that orientation and training. Maybe you're sitting at coffee and you ask them a question and they laugh at you in front of the coworkers and make you feel uncomfortable and that kind of thing. They don't encourage you to speak up. They say, just go and get the job done. I don't care. Those are bad supervisors. And we know that when you have a bad supervisor, it doesn't matter what kind of workers are working underneath them, everyone's at a high risk of being hurt. So the reason that I'm telling you this, like I said, it's out of your hands, obviously, but it's important that you know that when you have that bad supervisor, that you're at a higher risk. So whether it's you getting information somewhere else or getting employment somewhere else or whatever the case is, just that awareness piece is important. I'm going to show a quick video here. It's on the 3 rights. So all workers in Canada have 3 rights, 3 legal rights, and as well as some responsibilities, which we'll talk about after too, which are in place to help them protect themselves in the workplace. I'm going to show the video and we'll talk about it after.
I have the right to know the hazards. I have the right to refuse unsafe work.
I have the right to participate in safety.
6,000 Saskatchewan people under the age of 25 are hurt on the job every year. They cut and burn their hands. They fall. They hurt their ankles and legs. They go blind. They wreck their backs. They die. WorkSafe is trying to change this. Young workers need to know the risk. They need to know their rights. 46% of the injuries to youth will be to your hands, 17% to your backs, 15% to your legs, 11% to your arms, 10% to your eyes, and 3 young people will die this year.
Previously, I'd never really thought that it was much danger, but after seeing and hearing the presentation, I believe what he's saying now.
Boss tells you to do something, you don't think twice, you just go, especially as a level 2 or level 1, you want to do it and you want to impress, right? So now you definitely want to think about it.
I lost a leg during coming home from work, and I got hit by a semi from a construction site nearby my house. I basically tell everybody to watch out for one another and be safe.
I didn't know that you could refuse work, that you didn't feel safe, because isn't a part of your job doing what you're told to do and having to do it even though you don't feel like it's safe?
You have the right to know the hazards. You have the right to refuse unsafe work. You have the right to participate in safety. WorkSafe Saskatchewan. Work to live.
So, like I said, these 3 rights exist for all Canadians to help them have the legal capacity or ability to protect themselves. So, in review, they were the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to refuse unsafe work. So here's, like I said, these are the 3 rights. So what do they mean exactly? So the right to know means generally the right to know how to do your job safely. So if there are hazards in the workplace, it's your right to know what those are, what kind of training you need, location of safety and first aid, and lastly, what personal protective equipment is required on the job and for what tasks, and also how to be able to maintain that personal protective equipment, identify if it's not good anymore, that type of thing. The right to participate means the right to participate in safety in the workplace. All workplaces in Saskatchewan with 10 or more employees are required to have an occupational health committee. So that means places like your school have an occupational health committee, maybe a restaurant, anywhere with more than 10 employees are required to have a committee. So you can be on that committee or run to be on that committee, bring up issues to that committee as well as your supervisor and your employer. So that's your right to participate. Lastly, the right to refuse. So if you're doing a task that is unusually dangerous, you feel like you're about to get injured, or maybe you don't have the training for, it's your right to refuse that task until that concern or that issue is cleared up. So there's a couple of different steps to refusing work formally. First step is reporting your safety concern to your supervisor or your employer. If you're finding that changes aren't necessarily being made or not being made quick enough, you can also bring it up to your occupational health committee for their review. And lastly, if you're finding that nothing's being done, you can always contact the Occupational Health and Safety Division. The contact information is on saskatchewan.ca, so the phone number and email address and that type of thing. Remember, you can't be punished for refusing unsafe work. So that means you can't be docked pay, sent home for the day, fired, whatever the case is. It's your legal right to refuse unsafe work if it's the job, your task you're doing is unusually dangerous. Of course, with all rights come responsibilities. We don't have much time, but just as a reminder, there's all the laws and regulations and legislation lives in a document called the Saskatchewan Employment Act and the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations. And in there, it says that the worker, the responsibility, and the employer all have a responsibility to ensure that their workplace is safe. So the employer has to provide, a safe workplace as well as a supervisor to you. Worker's responsibility is to do things like speak up if they identify any risks, follow the policies and procedures. So if you're, working from heights and you're told to wear fall protection, it's your responsibility to do that. So it's a shared responsibility that everyone has to make sure that the workplace is safe. Next, I'm going to show you a worker's story. So this is a story of Curtis's story. And some of the things that I want you to try and focus or pay attention on when he's telling his story is he talks about how he felt uncomfortable. So he was new to this workplace, but he was not new to building grain bins. And so he had experience building grain bins, but he was with a new company and a new group of workers. So he felt uncomfortable. He had new coworkers, like I said. Most of them were older than him, so he was kind of the youngest person on there. And he wasn't comfortable speaking up or using his voice to express his concern because he was new. And so, like I had mentioned earlier, that's a really common theme that we see, especially for young folks when they're starting work. So pay attention to that. And without further ado, I'll put it on. We'll talk a bit about it after.
In the summer of '99, I was 17 years old. I just graduated from high school and had an opportunity to go play junior A hockey. Things were looking good for me, but then I got injured at work. I'm Curtis Weber, a husband, a father of two, and an injured worker.
Curtis was just this little guy that was happy-go-lucky. He was always on the go, always doing something, whether it was right or wrong. As a risk taker, he thought he was invincible most of the time.
Curtis was out doing the crazier things and got you to do the crazier things too. His enthusiasm for that type of stuff was pretty infectious. So grateful for that because that meant we had a fun childhood.
The good thing about Curtis is that if somebody got caught getting into trouble, he was never one to run away. He'd face the music. 100% he's got your back no matter what.
As a kid, I was really active in sports, soccer, baseball, football, but hockey was a passion of mine. And my last year of minor hockey, I was scouted to a camp in Drayton Valley, Alberta, and I was really excited about that opportunity.
Knowing that he was going to go to Alberta and play hockey, he pretty much just wanted to have fun for the summer. So we thought, well, if you're going to do that, then maybe you better find a job.
Dad had a company building bins for 25 years or more. 99 was the first year Dad had to close his crew down. I'd actually got a job with a new company. They had contacted my dad. They asked my dad what he thought about having me work for this new company.
Curtis knew how to build bins, so I wasn't really too concerned about getting hurt, or that was farthest thing from my mind.
We were planning to go fishing for August long weekend with the whole crew. Supposed to be the time of our life, but unfortunately with the way things went, we didn't get much of a summer. It was 29th of July, 1999. That's when it all changed for us.
On the day of my injury, we were setting up a grain bin and putting that bin on top of a hopper bottom. I was the one that was steadying the hopper from the wind. It was quite windy that day, so as I was guiding the hopper underneath the line, the operator of the crane, who was actually the owner of the company, didn't put the boom down far enough with our crane, and we backed directly into the power line, sending through 14,400 volts of electricity through my body in 3 separate cycles. The first cycle was shared between myself and 2 other coworkers. Where they were situated, though, after the first cycle of electricity had gone through them, they were ejected and thrown out of that live zone. But where I was situated, I was surrounded by steel, so it threw me into one of the legs of the hopper. That's what triggered the second cycle. After that cycle had gone through me, it tried The electricity tried throwing me right back to where I started from, triggering the third and final cycle of 14.4.
Oh, this is it?
Yeah, this is the place. A long time ago, I guess. Curtis was the ground point, stuck inside the hopper. It looked like he was in an orb of fire, probably 10, 12 feet around, bouncing him around. Finally, he hit the ground and completely grounded it. That blew the transformer and actually started a grass fire, I think a half mile down the road.
There was complete chaos with the crew. They said that my body was physically smoldering. I was unconscious.
I assumed from what I saw, Curtis was dead. Our boss went over to Curtis. He said he's breathing. He's rolling around in dirt, but he didn't look swollen. He wasn't charred. He looked red. You could see his jewelry burnt into his neck. Wherever we touched him, his skin would come off on his hands, his arms, like peeling a piece of saran wrap. After another one, he could just keep going.
The paramedics that were on the scene knew kind of my situation. They certainly weren't sure if I was going to survive my injuries with the severity of the burns, and as well as the chance of infection was one of the most worrying things as well. From that point, I was rushed into the University Hospital in Saskatoon.
So we got down to ICU and we went in, and there was all these machines I was not expecting. I thought maybe I was able to talk to him and that he would be awake. When the doctor was talking to us, he had said that over the next couple of days we might have to make a decision. I just thought, oh my God, I can't believe we're here, and I didn't think this happened in my family. And why did it happen to him?
You walk in expecting to give someone a hug and say it's going to be okay, and then you're confronted with a mom who thinks that she's lost her son. It hit us like a ton of bricks at that point, I would say. Yeah, that our friend may die.
The next morning, I went down to see him, and I remember the nurse saying, just to warn you, he's a little puffy today. I just couldn't recognize him. It was that bad, and it was weeks before I could recognize him again.
The first about 5 weeks I spent in intensive care in a coma. From that point on, I was going in for surgeries pretty well every other day.
The doctor would come out and he'd draw me a picture and show me the little troubled areas. And then every time he would come out, these circles got bigger and bigger on these troubled areas, and it just went on and on and on.
The right side of my face was extremely badly burned. Some of the bone was exposed on my jaw and those sorts of things. My right arm was amputated. That was kind of where it entered into my body. And then exiting out my left leg, that was also amputated.
Good. As parents, nobody should go through this. Then the day came where he wanted to see himself. Well, the room scattered. So we went back and we lifted up the mirror, and he looked at himself and he turned his head back and forth. And all he said was, just one side, eh? Like, amazing. Like, he just had such a positive attitude with everything.
It was a 6-month span from the time I was admitted to the hospital from the time that I was released. In that 6-month period, I was right around 30 surgeries. On top of those, I had another 12 to 14 reconstructive and plastic surgeries in Toronto. So from the day of my injury to the day I was pretty much done with physiotherapy and reconstructive and plastic surgeries was about a 6-year period.
Being 18, you think you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and you really find out in a hurry that life changes in seconds.
I look at, being here.
You take a look at the whole crew and most young people and most people, I think you have a good work ethic and they're there to please their boss, myself included, right? You're earning a living, you're getting paid a wage. You want to work hard. Your parents tell you, go to work, don't stand around, work hard, do what the boss asks, right? Instead of questioning, we did what the boss asked.
Again, it goes back to that whole thing. It was not only that I was a young worker afraid of speaking up and asking those questions, it was also that it was my 3rd day on the job and I didn't feel comfortable asking those questions.
I think it's a macho attitude. You look back on it later on in life and you realize just how stupid that line of thinking is. You sort of learn by your mistakes as you go along, but some mistakes are bigger than others, and some mistakes they can't be undone.
Young workers are very vulnerable. They don't know. And it can happen fast. I mean, nobody expected it, and it happened in a split second. And we all were aware of the risk when we got to the yard, and it still happened.
When you hear the phrase, if it feels wrong, it probably is wrong, I would say that's probably speaking to your gut. And certainly when you're in situations where that just don't feel right, there's nothing wrong with maybe questioning it. Not asking the question oftentimes when it comes to your safety is what is really the stupid thing.
And I think for me, the biggest message that I can get across to youth is to make sure you're taking those opportunities to ask those questions. If you feel uncomfortable doing something, or you don't feel safe doing something, or properly trained to do something, make sure you take the opportunity to bring it up with somebody and voice that concern. Because for me, I don't have that opportunity anymore to go back. From the day that I woke up out of my coma to the day I woke up this morning, I can honestly say that there wasn't a day that went by that I was angry at anybody or depressed or felt sorry for myself. And I think for me, that was important in having a successful recovery and being able to do the things that I used to do. Having those dreams and, be able to get married and, always wanted to have a family one day, and now watch my kids do all those things that I love to do is something that was important to me to get to that stage where I'm at today.
That's Curtis's story. And so the reason that we like sharing that video so much is because there's some really common themes in there that we find to be common across, injuries for lots of folks. Curtis is doing well right now. He has his own company and he goes around the world and tells his story. He's an excellent public speaker and makes a good living out of it now. But obviously lucky to be around today with the injury that he had, and so we're really lucky to have Curtis be the type of person who's open about sharing his story and willing to do that. So thanks to him, and like I said, we just love sharing that video especially for young folks to see. Just in closing, some things that you can do to stay safe and healthy at work. So this is kind of a recap of the things we talked about for training and orientation, how important that is. Don't feel uncomfortable to ask. That's probably one of the most important things, especially in the short term, that you can do. When you're new at work, you go over instructions if you have to. There's a lot of information coming at you at once. And don't hesitate to say, what did you say about using this tool or that tool, or when I'm driving the vehicle, what am I supposed to, do inspections and that kind of thing. So don't be afraid to go over instructions. Find out what to do in case of emergency. And again, speak to your supervisor about any issues. So in closing, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Just ask. If it feels wrong, it probably is wrong. And, if you have those questions, you speak with your supervisor. Again, thanks for attending the session. We hope that you got some good information that you can take back with you today. And enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.